This is the Get a Life podcast. Ex-Cult Conversations.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Get a Life podcast, Ex-Cult Conversations. Today, we are here with Carmen, Richard, and Ben. And our special guest today is Cassie Davies from Australia. Welcome, Cassie. It's so great that you're on here. So, Cassie and I have been talking for a bit, and you're just such an inspiration, absolutely such an inspiration. Oh, I want to welcome you with all the courage and dedication and the thoughtfulness and the compassion that you have had while going through your thought process of how to do this. So I'm going to just hand the mic over to you, and you can just let the viewers know when you left and what led up to your leaving, and dive into your story.
Cool. So firstly, I just wanted to sort of say that, I'm not opposed to the PBCC as a mainstream Christian church. But there are real genuine people in there, and I'm not opposed to them and their doctrines. The reason I'm coming on the podcast today was that, Heidi's story, I could really relate to Heidi's story, and listening to her and crying as she was telling her story, I was just compelled to speak up, because it's more and more evident that, her story isn't isolated. It's something that's rife within the members of the PBCC, and that kind of just spurred me. I was like, I must speak up, and I'm here because I want to see change. I, believe that the PBCC system is inadvertently breeding generations of bullies, and in turn, those bullies are turning into, abusers. This slow erosion of human rights is just a breeding ground for horrific abuse, and then the cover-ups after that are happening are just inexcusable. I don't care about Bruce Hales and his millions. I mean, he can't take them with him, so I don't know what he's going to do with them all. I care about the wrong and immoral things that are happening in that system that's created to get those millions. So I'm speaking up because I want to find a solution. And I don't want to find myself in 10 or 15 years' time, or 20 years' time even, with nephews and nieces, or hearing about nephews and nieces going through that same systematic abuse. So I think that's why we're all here, right?
It is.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah. So for me, I was born in Perth, Western Australia. I was the second eldest of 10 children, so it was a very big family. I left firstly in mid-2005, and then might have been 2004, mid-2004, and then Christmas 2005 I left again, and left for good. So I've been out properly for about 18 years now. My family were a very big family, and being the second eldest, it was, very busy. My mum was one of 13 and my dad was one of 7. So there was always company, there's always people around, and, cousins and all sorts of company. I don't know exactly how we came to be, how my grandparents came to be in the PBCC. I don't know that story. Obviously, we don't talk about history a lot in there, as you would know. So I'm second generation, as far as I know, third generation. And for my parents and certainly myself, that's all we knew. We were born into it, and then we grew up in it, and that's all we knew. I went to a public primary school. So, but then obviously there was restrictions there, like we weren't allowed to use computers, we weren't allowed to watch TV, we weren't allowed to, do sex education or religious studies or anything like that. We were pulled out of those classes. And then we did homeschooling for high school. So as soon as it came to high school, there wasn't a school, Brethren school at that stage for us because we were in the country and they didn't have the Brethren school. So we had to do it through distance education. And I thrived in that environment because I love to learn, and I'm a bit of a bookworm anyway, so I really loved that. And I could be home a lot more helping mum with the younger ones. So I remember I used to sit up at night doing my work because it was a bit chaotic during the day with all the kids coming and going and fighting and screaming and yelling. So I would sleep during the day and then stay up at night and do my studies. And I would have the baby at my feet and I'd be rocking the baby and doing my studies. And that's how I got through high school. Something that really irked me was when it came to year 11, I was quite competitive. And when it came to year 11, it came time to pick what they called tertiary, what do they call? Do you know what they call, Ben? TEE subject?
Studies? Is it tertiary, tertiary studies? Or?
Yeah, tertiary. I can't remember. TEE subjects anyway. So basically, what you have to do 4 TEE subjects to be able to go on to college. You have to pass 4 TEE exams to be able to go on to college. And I wanted to pick 4, and I was restricted and told that no, I could only do 3. So I fought that really hard because I was really peeved. I wanted to measure myself against the other girls that I knew would, like the girls from my primary school years that I knew had talked about college and were going on to college. And I didn't necessarily want to go on to college. I just wanted to measure myself against them because I was that little bit of, sort of a competitive spirit. So I wanted to just at least have that in my, resume that I'd passed the exams, that I could have gone on to college. But yeah, the powers to be said, no, you can't do 4. You've got to, the max you can do is 3. So yeah, that was it. I had to drop one.
And that's purely to control, so you don't ever think about, because you don't have it there, right? You didn't do it, so you.
Well, it closes the door. It closes the door.
Yeah.
College. So
yeah, Just explaining that for outsiders that don't know the system that well.
Yeah. Oh, so it's purely a systematic thing to close the door and not give you the option. If the temptation's not there, you can't take it, right? If it's been closed off to you, there's no way, So yeah, that was really brutal. I was really peeved about that. But as I got older, so from quite a young age, I remember we had a great family life. We had so many people around us and cousins, and we would go to granny's house and, had grannies on both sides and then cousins on both sides. And we were farmers. So we had, this farm to roam around, and it was a very happy life growing up. But as I got older, I became more aware of just what I perceived to be quite a toxic relationship between my parents. When I look back, I can remember just, a lot of arguing, a lot of sarcasm thrown at each other, a lot of contempt, just general contempt in the house. And I don't think it was always that way. I think from when we were quite young, it was probably not so bad. But and I think they were actually probably one of the couples that got to choose each other because they were local to each other. So my mum was from Dalwhinnie, my dad was from Killarney. And, they used to interchange a lot. In interchange, I know outside listeners probably won't understand what interchange means, but that's where, the church sort of goes to each place on a Sunday or weekend or whatever. So I believe they got to choose each other. I do know that, my mum's brother had some reservations about them getting married and voiced those to mum. And I know that because she told me that herself. But ultimately they got married and that was it. 10 kids later. So I'm not going to go into any details of what I witnessed of their relationship, but because I want to show some compassion. And I realised, that they were just a product of their environment and their upbringing. So, I'm not excusing it, but I'm just not ready to share, some of the stuff that I witnessed. So I can only say that, listening to Anne Hamilton's story on here, I was just literally sobbing the whole way through. I felt I could really relate to it. And then Heidi Camley's story was just the catalyst for me, to speak up, because it just breaks my heart how widespread and systematic the abuse is. And it has to change, like something has to change. And that's not even getting started on the denial and the victim shaming and, the follow on of the abuse. Anyways, I digress. I started to notice a bit of a pattern with mum being unwell. So we were, what I do remember is we were quite often shipped out to family members for quite long periods of time, and we were told that mum was unwell and unwell mentally. And I started to notice a bit of a pattern, and it kind of came after every child. So, if I look back a bit, it was after every baby. There'd be a period of bliss when the baby came home, and then gradually it would deteriorate, and then, she would be unwell and sent for help, and we'd all be shipped out to various family members until she was back on the straight and narrow. I felt really frustrated that she was always labelled the problem. From where I was sitting, she was always labelled unsubmissive and and just too outspoken, I suppose. And from where I was sitting, I couldn't understand why it was always her that was a problem. I felt she was just pushed to the edge. At times it was actually more like she was being pushed to the edge of her sanity, and then she was labelled the basket case. So it was always, when she finally gave in, she was actually labelled bipolar. I mean, that was thrown around a lot, that she was bipolar, although I never ever saw a actual official diagnosis of that. And then things I started to notice as I was growing up, she would be attacked at every opportunity for the most smallest things. I mean, my sister one time had a little girl over for a play date after school. Another Brethren girl came over for a play date, and the mum came to pick the child up, and they'd had a little argument, as kids do. And mum sort of said to her, she came out and she was having a big say-so about my sister, and mum kind of said, oh, come on, that's a bit unfair. I kind of find that sometimes you're better off just to let kids sort it out themselves. And this mother turned around and said to my mum, oh, you're just mental. Go and take your tablets. That was just a standard. That was just a standard sort of rhetoric that she got every time she spoke up or disagreed with anybody, or it was just, we knew it. In fact, we used to get it in the playground, or at church. If we ever had a disagreement with anyone in the community or any of the kids, it was always, oh, you're just mental, you're just like your mum. Oh, you're mental, you're just like your mum. That's kind of bullying that happened just all the time. So that was from such a young age, we just believed that she was mental, but as we got older, we kind of were going, hang on, what we're seeing happening here is not quite that.
The sad thing with that, Cassie, is that, like, in a similar circumstance I witnessed and have heard other people say, kids don't have that opinion, aren't aware of that. That's learnt behaviour. So the sad thing is here, they've heard their parents talk about it.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, that's a prime example of the mother that like after a kid's argument is just going to turn around and attack her, like, oh, you're just mental, you're just like your mum. I mean, no, you're just mental, go and take your tablets, So after that, I, started to sort of wake up and go, hang on, she didn't say anything wrong. She wasn't doing anything wrong. She was actually trying to de-escalate the situation, and she's mental. And so I sort of became quite protective of her over that, after that, and started to sort of really waken up to what was going on, really. And then, she was just rebuked mental for everything that didn't agree with whoever. And it felt like that it was anticipated that she was mentally unstable because of her family history. It was very much a family history sort of line of thinking as well. I won't go into too much of that, but essentially her father took his own life when she was only 7, and it's rumoured that he was horrifically bullied by another member of the PBCC. That's a whole other story. And I believe she got help from Dr. Kirkpatrick even at some point. I remember his name being thrown around a lot around her mental health. And, she was given medication, and she used to fight against the medication. And, that was just, her being rebellious and all of the rest of it. And what I do know is I witnessed her become increasingly paranoid about being taken to see doctors. And any treatment that they were giving her, she was just so paranoid about it and used to fight against it with all her might. And we couldn't understand if this medicine is helping her, then why is she so against it? Why is she fighting with everything she's got against the medication? She'd go on it and she'd be subdued, and she'd be sort of sedated essentially. And then, she'd be barely able to cope in the house. And, I now understand more around what that was. But she also had a real paranoia about male practitioners. Like she refused, she just couldn't trust. And even today, she can't trust male practitioners, even in the general out there. She doesn't believe that they've got her best interests at heart. So that's really hard. And she was never allowed to go and see these people on her own. She always had to be supervised. Like she always had to have someone with her when she was going to see these people. And, I was like, how is it that the doctors didn't, pick up on something? But I mean,
they probably did.
Well, now we understand they were probably carefully selected, right?
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah. And outside doctors do pick up on it, because I've had a conversation with one now as I go, that I used to see with a priest, and they're like, what can we do? We understand that the narrative is someone's trying to control the narrative, but we're not going to help the situation if we go, can you go out? So it's so hard.
There's so much there. And she was even put in Greylands at one point, and Greylands is like horrific. It's essentially a prison for the worst mental cases in the state, and it's a horrific place. In fact, I believe it's actually been closed down now. Well, it's not closed yet, but they're in the process of closing it down because they're going towards a more community-based treatment. But I wrote down what it is actually. Greylands is Western Australia's largest mental health inpatient facility and the only public standalone psychiatric teaching hospital. And I mean, she was locked behind bars. I believe at one time she was put in the wrong section, and she was locked up with prisoners that were mentally unstable. My brother told me that he went to visit her there. I don't remember a lot of visiting her there because I think I've just blocked it out, to be honest. But my brother told me he remembered visiting her there, and in the corridor he witnessed another guy stabbing himself. And I mean, we were children, we were kids, so I don't know what the hell we were even doing there, but I don't know.
When they classify it like a psychiatric hospital / in-house, it's literally just a prettier name for what were mental asylums, prison health doctors, psychiatric counsellors, or create a proper plan or an environment for somebody to live or grow safely with that.
Yeah, I mean, and we question now, was she even mentally, or was she driven there? But anyway, she was so terrified. Like, some of the experiences she had in there, she's never spoken about it because she just doesn't talk about it. I know for a fact she was so terrified of that place that one time we happened to be driving past it, not even related. I think she had been down, and she'd been down to Perth, and she'd been unwell, and we'd picked her up, and she's still clearly quite distressed. And we were in the whole family in the van, and we were driving, and we happened to be driving past this hospital, and Dad had taken a wrong turn and realised, oh, shivers, he's got taken the wrong turn, he needs to go back. And he did a U-turn, and she was so terrified. She thought I think they might have had an argument or something. And she was so terrified, she thought that he was going to take her back there, that she tried to leap out of the vehicle. She tried to leap out of the vehicle. And I remember her unbuckling herself and literally opening the door and lunging for the door in front of all us kids, and Dad had to hold her in the vehicle. That's how scared she was of going back there. Like, it's...
Yeah, wow. The trauma there must have been, like, would never probably leave her. But do you see, like, now outside, like, looking back in at things like that, like the distrust that is created between family members, like in that scenario, for example, like because the system is church religion first and then family, you know how like brothers and sisters dob on each other, rat each other out, cousins, family. She probably suffers so much trauma from that place and distrust from men because or family that she probably could have even thought that it was just like a trap, like to get her back in there.
Oh, yeah, that was constant. Yeah, like there's other times that me and brother have had to wrestle a knife out of her hands and put our bodies in the doorway of the laundry so that she didn't harm herself. And another time she was so distressed she wanted to go. She just needed out, and we offered to take her for a drive. And we were driving, and we were doing 100 kilometers an hour in the car just to get her away, just to get her some air. And she again tried to leap from the car because she just needed to get away. So yeah, I'm just trying to illustrate for the listeners the kind of distress that we were dealing with as children, and there was no help for that. Like,
And was it a specific set of Priestleys that were handling this situation? Like, does Perth? I'm just going to relate it to Maple Creek. Like, does Perth have that systematic abuse and bullying from a specific set of families in Perth? Or is it like, did those positions of bullies that would come in and out, did it change with people? Or was it a specific set of people that were always in there stirring this up?
I think like initially, like I think it was just the toxicity of the relationship and the inability to speak up about that. And
inability because of the circumstances, you mean? Inability being the environment you're in?
Yes. Yeah. The
and
environment
the loss that comes with that.
I'm just trying to think of where the help should have been, right? Like, because we all speak out because we want to make changes, right? And so I think I'm just trying to expand it out.
She wasn't submissive in the relationship. So that's about as much as I can kind of say.
And bottom line, like with any relationship, if the woman, because men are above women, women are second to men. If the woman isn't submissive, that's the issue. That's the problem. Like in a similar situation, my grandma was very outspoken. Similar issue. Well, you had the car accident because you're not submissive. You had this happen to you because you're not submissive, not just coincidence or.
Yeah, but just an insight, like just a little insight into how terrible mental health how highly it featured in the members of the PBC. I mean, I was from a tiny little town of Killarney, and then there was Dalwallinu, it was a bit bigger, and both towns were probably, Killarney was at least 50-50 brethren, and then Dalwallinu was probably at least, 40% brethren. And I know a local doctor was posted there, and they stated that when they arrived there, they were looking for a church to join, And so they sort of were scouting out churches around Dalwallinu to find out which one they would join. And it became, she said, I'm just trying to be very careful here, because they were quoted as having said that after a very short period of time, it was very clear to them that the PBCC was not the church to join, and it was not the best church to join because of the incredibly high percentage of the members that she was treating with high or with strong antidepressants.
Yeah.
And so that's known like everywhere. My doctor locally said to me, he said, since I've left, like, and I still see the same GP, he said, like, the transition with mental health and health, he said, tell me honestly, like, why do you think there is such a high percentage of people that I treat here locally with alcohol issues, mental health issues, antidepressants? And it is a known thing. Like they've said, like I've had a Hales member of the member say to me, an older guy, like Hales guy, say to me, if you knew how many people on the front row here were on antidepressants, because Dr. Roger gave me Prozac at one point to help with depression. And he was like, if you only knew how many people on the front row were on the same tablets or on antidepressants. And I knew also that the quantity of people on the front row that also drank, which you couldn't drink alcohol with these tablets. So I'm like,
I know, but that's
Peter to pay Paul.
Mum was a heavy drinker as well and still is. And, you know, it blows my mind how the two can go together. It doesn't make any sense to me.
They don't. I really feel for all of them because it is a crutch. Like we all need crutches or vices in our life to help us cope with situations. Out here, we have people we can speak to. In there's nothing. It's just such a toxic environment. You rely heavily then on substance.
Yeah. And as far as my relationship with my dad, there wasn't a relationship. Like he was just there. He was the authoritarian. He was just there in the house. He was just there to come down on us when we weren't listening to Mum. And, you know, if she, you know, got desperate, you know, she'd say, well, I'll have to get Dad involved. And, there was no real connection with Dad. So I didn't really know who he was. He was just there, and he was just the authoritarian. So I was, for growing up, I was the golden haired child. Like I was the one that was, you know, totally buying everything. Like I was growing my hair, was the only one that was growing a hair, was not cut. It was down to my fingertips, and I used to get teased badly for it. But, you know, here I was believing that was the right thing to do. You know, I was Mum's little golden haired girl doing all the right things. And it got to a point where I couldn't work out why actually I was being left out of everything. All the teenagers were doing all this stuff and I was being left out, and I couldn't work out where, you know, I was a pretty ordinary kid, but I didn't understand, and thought I was well liked, but I was actually being left out of all the stuff. And it wasn't until I was actually introduced to the underworld that was going on that my whole perception of the brethren changed, because it was like the teenagers were doing stuff under, you know, in this underworld that was just mind blowing. Like to me, here I'd been doing all the right things for years and years and years. And then it came to a funny story. It came to a crunch because we were farmers. So Dad was always looking for, you know, help on the farm. And, you know, when it came to harvest time and seeding time, you had to go all night. So there was, you know, round the clock shift that needed to happen. And there was schooling also that needed to happen. And so, you know, the boys would be driving tractors all night and trying to do schoolwork during the day and whatever. And I used to beg Dad, you know, why can't I go out and drive the tractor? I can drive the tractor as good as the boys, you know, why can't I drive it? And the boys would always say, no, Cassie doesn't need to do that, and blah, blah, blah. And they were really anti about me coming to the farm. And I was like, I don't know what the problem is. Like, why are they so anti? And eventually Dad had to give in because something had to give, because there just wasn't enough people to go around. And so he said, no, that's it. Okay, Cassie's going to drive the tractor tonight. And then, of course, we were, you know, on our way out to the farm, and I was out going with my brothers, and they brought out a CD player or a, you know, CD player, and, you know, started introducing to music, you know, but you can't tell anyone. So they were terrified that I was such a goody two shoes that I was going to tell them. And so they had all this whole underworld of music happening out there at night because Dad was home in bed and nobody was there to supervise them. And they were terrified of me going out there because I was going to tell everybody. So, yeah, and then I was, of course, once I was introduced to the underworld and I didn't tell everybody or tell on everybody, then I was, exposed to all sorts of stuff that was going on that, I was just like, wow, okay, there's this
it's like a smoke and mirrors just lifts, right?
Yeah.
I grew up the same way. I had no friends because my parents were like in the sort of leadership and I was the goody kid, but I wasn't really, but I didn't have friends just to be safe,
you know. To be.
And then we end up out, like it's hilarious. It makes me like
Yeah. So I think what really shocked me in that process was the level of deceit that there was going on. Like you were literally like groomed to deceive your parents. And the level of deceit that we would go to keep it from Dad and Mum, like, was just unbelievable. And I mean, that's a whole level of mistrust, and
it's like two worlds going on, right?
Yeah.
This was one of the biggest conversations I had with my parents when I really blew up with them. Was a conversation I was phoning them to let them know, like, there's you got the wool pulled over your eyes. Like, what happens out here in this world is happening inside there. Like, there's no difference between drugs. There's no difference between alcohol. There's no difference between music. There's no difference between bars. There's no difference. The brethren kids are doing the exact same thing that I'm doing. Like, there's no separation. Yeah. And that's what kind of blew us into a fight in that conversation, because they can't comprehend that there's a whole other world that's happening.
Well, it's that cognitive dissonance. It's that cognitive dissonance. They don't want to accept that, because then that means that they agree that they're living a part of this lie. And also it's happening because the consequences of being caught out are so extreme, so bad, that there is this whole polar opposite world existing within the brethren. The only difference is it happens out here is we don't think we're special people. We don't put ourselves on a pedestal or put people on a pedestal. We're just average humans who are flawed and whatever. And the trouble is, the hard thing is when you put somebody on a pedestal or a group of people on a pedestal or yourself, it's very hard to get down off that.
Yeah. So there was this whole, like, they were, going out of town and setting up these whole, like, little discos happening. Cars were pumping music, and there were all these hidden music systems in cars, like under seats and in the backs of the radio, and all sorts of things going on. And then the drinking of teenagers and underage kids, and it was just, and then the flirting. I mean, there's no sex education in there, so you can imagine, like, getting in an environment where you put a heap of teenagers drinking, flirting, whatever else. And I thank God really that I was considered to be the goody two shoes, and I was in that sense a little bit untouchable, because I feel like it saved me from a whole host of guilt and shame around that, because when I didn't really learn that stuff was going on till much, much later. So yeah, I was just like mind blown that there was this whole, as well as the underworld, there was an additional layer of that that I was thankfully sort of saved from. Anyway, I do want to talk about something that I witnessed around that time, and it was an argument around consent in the bedroom. I'm not going to go into details, but to say that it raised a lot of feelings and a hell of a lot of questions for me. And I felt terribly confused and desperately needed to get my head around it. But obviously it's a completely taboo subject, so you cannot ask questions about it or talk to anyone about it, or even say what you've witnessed. Like, you couldn't even admit to seeing or hearing what you'd heard.
You mean being in the brethren, you didn't want to talk about it with other people, what you witnessed?
Yeah.
You never talk about sex anyway. Yes. Yeah.
That's right. Yeah. So I guess what I'm trying to highlight here is what the lack of education in that area and that subject creates. You've got all these questions and all these confusions, and you've got nowhere to go with them. So then I think it was around that time that it was the change of guard at the top. I think JSH was dying, and there was all this conjecture around who was going to be the next man of God. I don't know what it was like for you, Ben, in the eastern states, but over here there was some conjecture about 2 candidates over here. And
yeah, it was the same. And because a lot of, like, my mum's from over there, like so many people here have relatives from over there, there was like this whole divide of
the whole brethren, seemed to suddenly just overnight just become like split in 2. You were either for one or you were for the other. And
Are they both still in?
I don't believe one of them is. I don't know.
I know that one was like just as toxic as the Hales family. So they were like, they were like bullies versus bullies. The stronger bullies won. And then the other one was kind of like a nice, gentle guy. So he was just like shipped off over here, and you get your little acreage, you know, not quite, but, you know, like kings and queens when they fight, and the strongest wins. And if you bow the knee and submit to us, we'll look after you. You're still okay. Just don't rival.
I'm so glad that you say that, Ben, because like we didn't really know what the hell was going on. Like, it was all just like Chinese whispers and, you know, like quiet conversations, and nobody really knew.
And the same. I was only in year 7, but I also was emotionally mature enough to be like, hang on. This sounds a lot like the books I'm reading on history of the kings or something, you know. Game of Thrones.
But did it, like, over in WA anyway, at least it was decided you were either on one side or the other, and there was this whole bullying going on at school and this whole conflict, and they didn't really know what to do with us, because I think one of them we were related to on mum's side of the family, and the other one we were related to on dad's side of the family. So where did they put us? Like, oh, shivers. Like, where do you sit? And we didn't know where the hell we sat, because we didn't know what the hell was going on.
Meanwhile, you're just happy that the attention's off your family drama.
We should have just stuck with the Sivingtons and not had all these Hales. I mean,
because we'd probably still be in there.
Yeah, but these 2 were nothing to do with the Hales, as far as I know. I mean, I'm sure they were in their pockets, but it was just hearsay and, I don't know, conjecture, and then a heap of people kept getting shut up, like, as whole families. Like, just suddenly overnight, people were shut up as a family for the most ridiculous reason, and it was a lot of them in our locality at least, and it was shocking. And they were really, really coming down on people for compromise, for talking to you. So, you'd be doing schoolwork with one kid one day, and then the next day you weren't allowed to speak to them because their whole family was behind. And so it was so confusing. And then I was
going to say, I don't think it, from what I can see, affected here so much with the people being shut up. The more vocal probably, but I know because the Hales family had, like, Queensland branch, the Kirkpatrick relation, whatever that is. The Kirkpatrick relation, Dr. Roger. Then Sydney had out to Athol Green, sort of Penrith our way. So that was all, like, sorted because they were Hales' sister family. And then down to Melbourne, where you've got the Bumstead sort of that. So their roots were kind of like their main, team group was really sorted on the east. I think it was just nothing had happened over in Western Australia with family connections or like marriage or wealth or whatever. So it was kind of like east versus west and
Wild West.
Yeah.
Wild West is very
Game of
wild.
Thrones.
Yeah. So we got scot-free for a while. We sailed through and we're just like confusion. And then my brother, he was 15 at the time, was accused of watching TV in a worldly person's house. So we all got confined, the whole family. Now, that's unusual in itself.
I hope it was worth it. What show was it?
Well, the funny thing is he'd watched plenty of TV in everybody else's house, in lots of people's houses, but he had not specifically been into this particular house ever. So the story it's funnier. Like, okay, so we got confined as a whole family, which is unusual in itself, because usually if one of the kids does something wrong, the parents get shut up with the kid, and then the other kids get shipped off, until it's sorted.
And like
but
just explain, Cassie, to outsiders, like confined and shut up. Like if somebody does something wrong, like watches television and you get caught, you basically get isolated within the household if you're still living at home with the parents who you're not allowed to partake of community meetings, churches, gatherings, speak to your own family members. Like, for example, recently when my grandpa was confined or shut up, he had to live in the back part of the house away from his wife. And these people are in their 60s, 70s, like grown-ass adults and, you know, like treated like infectious, you know, patients.
They can't
so that's what
they can't eat at the same table. They take the meals to them and drop them at the door and they eat in their room and all that sort of stuff. Well, we were confined as a whole family. So it was a little bit shocking to start with. It's like, what happened? You know, like, why us? What have we done? Anyway, he refused. He was quite rebellious and he refused to admit to something he hadn't done. So, you know, they told him all sorts of things. He was responsible for the whole family being disciplined and blah, 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 blah. You know, really came down hard on him. But, you know, it's the best. Actually, as a family, it was the only time that we actually had as a family. Like I think it was about 12 weeks and we had all of a sudden there was no church to go to, no church commitments, no church, you know, routine, strict, full on busy routine. And we were as a family all together able to sit down for a meal and enjoy a meal and discuss things. Like we had all this time on our hands suddenly. And it was the best. I often say to my brother, it's the only time I really remember feeling like a family because it was the only time that we had time to feel like a family, you know, like, and we did some amazing things. Dad and Mum, we lived right across from the main meeting hall in Killarney. So, you know, we had to see them going to church every single day. And Dad and Mum would give us dinner early and then whisk us off in the car out to the farm so that we didn't have to sit there and watch out the window while our friends were all socialising across the street. And, you know, we'd go out the farm and we'd drive around the farm and we'd do rallies out the farm and, you know, ride the motorbikes and ride this and that and everything else that we had on the farm. And as a family, you know, that just never happened before. And
do you reckon your mum found reprieve in that too? Like enjoyed that moment of normality?
100%. Like we used to sit up, Mum and me and my two older brothers used to sit up at night after, you know, church had finished, or even sometimes during church, we'd try and get the kids into bed so that, you know, everyone was in bed, and we'd sit up around the table just chatting. Like for Dad, it was very different because he had the responsibility of bringing us back in line. So I don't think he could relax and enjoy it as much. But for us, especially Mum and us kids, you know, we'd sit up around the table talking about stuff for hours into the night. And towards the end, that's what the funny thing is, towards the end of the 12 weeks, we started to think, you know, is the sacrifice even really worth it? Like, come on, guys, like, you know, like we're having so much fun. This is amazing. Like,
that's amazing.
Why are we even trying? And they used to, you know, come and see Michael and Dad and Mum in the lounge room. We wouldn't be allowed in because we weren't involved, and we'd be all like running to the doors and listening as hard as we could to catch any glimpse of conversation because it was just hilarious. And then we'd repeat it and just be laughing and making fun of it later. And, you know, they'd call Michael, "You're just a contentious young man," because he wouldn't admit to something that he hadn't actually done. He just refused to cave to them. And yeah, the very, very funny times that we had around the time.
It's so interesting to hear that, Cassie, because my auntie that lives in Western Australia, her family and my cousin that's out now, she told me a very similar story that her whole family were out for so long and they never ever decided got to the point where the brethren actually brought them back because they weren't going to come back. They were like, actually, we enjoy this family unit. We enjoy this life. We enjoy going away as a family and experiencing what that is for real. And they were like, oh, we're actually going to lose them, so we better bring them back.
Yeah, my punchline.
It's so interesting hearing a similar story. Like how many other people have done the same thing and just have not, like, try it, guys. Leave and try it.
You stole my punchline, Ben, because that's exactly what happened. Me and Mum and my brothers were sitting up late one night. Dad was already in bed in his pajamas. I think Mum was even in her pajamas. And we were just sitting up late when the priest hadn't come to see us for about I think it was 2 weeks, and we were wondering, I don't know why they didn't come last week, but anyway, we're happy out, so whatever. And and then, like, it was, probably 10 o'clock or 9:30 at night, and knock on the door. And Mum was like, oh, shivers, who's that? Like, what on earth's going on? And so she went we all, went to the front door, and Mum was like, and then there's one of the priests standing at the front door. And Mum was like, oh, do you want me to go and get Ken? Because that's the default, it has to be the man of the house that takes the message. So, do you want me to go and get Ken? No. We just wanted to let you know that you're free to move around again. And Mum was like, huh? What? You mean we can come back to the meeting? And she was like, and he was like, yes. We decided that you're all free to move around again. Anyway, so we were.
I've never been freer.
But that's the thing. Michael had never backed down. He'd never said that he'd done one that he was supposed to have done. Like, it was just, you were free to move around again. So away we went back to church. So it's almost like they got wind that, we were starting to wonder if it was worth it. And so they had to just quickly scoop us back before it went too far. So, that was the most strangest thing. Anyway, as you can imagine, Michael, I shouldn't say his name, but anyway, and Michael didn't take that too well, and he just started to get even more rebellious. So he started playing football and doing all sorts of things with the local team, and, of course, that's completely outlawed. And Mum obviously was terrified then. She started to really see that she was going to lose him. And so she wanted to send him away for encouragement. I'm sure lots of you have heard about the encouragement trips. But this wasn't quite like this, because this was Mum was driving it. So she sort of wanted to send him over to my auntie in New Zealand, and she had to sort of get it by the priest and, whatever else. And eventually it was agreed that he could go over there, but I had to go as a chaperone. So lucky me. I went as the chaperone to my auntie's place, and I don't know how, it's just very convenient, but there happened to be 3-day meetings, of course, in the place where we were going. So away we went to stay with our auntie in New Zealand, and there was 3-day meetings there. And look, we had funny thing, in the airport on the way out, I bought my first digital camera, and they were outlawed. They were so naughty. Here I was, the good chaperone girl, and I bought the first digital camera. Oh, my goodness.
I remember the controversy. I remember that point in time where it was like, are they allowed? Are they not? There's like a screen on it,
So, I just bought one in the airport as we were leaving. So, anyway, of course, at the 3-day meetings, this whole digital camera was quite an iconic thing, because, nobody had digital cameras. So, that was my little, being different. And when we were over there, we had a ball, as you do. Like, I can't say that, all the social gatherings and all of that wasn't fun. It was,
they always are away from your own home, away from the toxic environment you grow up in. Like, New Zealand, the best time. Overseas, the best time.
Yeah. Anyway, in church, one of those 3-day meetings in the church, I noticed that a fella over there had his eye on me, and he was making it very obvious. And so I did the old yawn trick. Oh, and sure enough, he yawned. He yawned back, and I tried that. Yeah.
Is this a?
Did you not know that?
I'm gay. I didn't know these like little techniques that the straight people did in the church.
Well, I hadn't been told about this, and Michael and my brother didn't know about it until just the other day. I was laughing about it, but it was. I just wanted to see if I was making it, like if I was imagining it, or if it was real. So I just yawned, and sure enough, he yawned, and that happened about 3 times. So I fairly knew that. Okay, this guy's, he's got a bit of a liking to me. Anyway. So after one of the churches, he sent his sister along to ask if he could call, because, that's all you could do, really, in those days. You could just call. And I was quite rebellious at that stage, like, in a sense that I just said to him, no, you tell your brother to come and do his own dirty work. So I wanted him to come and ask me himself.
This is what I love about West Australian women. This is why I love Western Australian women. They are boss bitches. They don't take anyone's shit.
Yeah, that happens in Canada as well.
Yeah.
Oh, and Canadian.
Yeah. So along he came and, can I call? And so, yeah, I said to him, but I was very clear to him straight away that I didn't want to talk about getting married until I was 21, which was already pushing the envelope because at that stage we were all supposed to get married at 20. So if you had a fella, if you were talking to a guy, you were supposed to get married at 20. And I was 18 at the time. And I was already trying to buy myself some time because of, obviously what I knew of a relationship and what I was afraid of. I was already trying to push that timeline, out. Not really knowing what I was doing, but I was just determined not to even think about it until I was 21. So I'd said to him, I'm happy for you to call, but I don't want you to talk about marriage until I'm 21. So we talked on the phone, weekly for the next 18 months. And kept it quiet. Luckily kept it very quiet until one of my brothers got drunk at my uncle's house on a Saturday evening and spilled the beans. And then everybody knew that, Cassie's going to marry this guy from New Zealand and, blah, 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 blah. So then the pressure began to mount and it was always the question, when are you getting married? When are you getting married? So when are you getting married? I mean, I'd seen this guy once and I was talking to him on the phone, but the whole idea of getting married to him was just the next level. So eventually the pressure just got so much that the more the pressure built, the more scared I got. And eventually it got so intense that I just decided, stuff it. I have to see him again before we get married. Like I felt like there was no out, that this is what I had to do. I had to get married to this guy. I'd been talking to him for 2 years. So this was just my pathway and it was planned out for me. But by damned if I was going to get married without seeing him again, at least. So I asked if I could see him again before we got married. And I outlined my concerns about, submission and consent and all the things that I was concerned about. And I was told I had to write a letter to BDH. So this fella, this new leader that I'd never met in my life, and I was having to write a very, very personal letter explaining why I should be able to see this guy before I get married. So I painstakingly got this letter together and explained all about my concerns of about submission and consent and how I, felt like I just really needed to see this guy before I made that decision. And I was then told I had to fax it to him. And I was like, well, that's a bit odd. No one has fax machines. So I had to go to a worldly person's business to fax this highly personal letter to a fax machine when nobody has fax machines. So why am I faxing to the leader when we don't have fax machines? That's a bit odd. But anyway, so away I go down to this worldly person's business to fax this thing. And of course, if receiving fax machines, that busy running hot, receiving faxes from all around the world, that it took an hour and a half for me to get that fax to be received. And I couldn't leave it there for it to send. For goodness sake, it had the content of the letter was so personal. Like I couldn't be leaving it there. And I was terrified that one of them would come along and read it. I just remember just shaking. I was terrified that somebody would get to see this letter before it got to its destination. Oh, little did I know when it got to its destination, it would be sent to hither and thither and everywhere else. I don't know. I don't have it. I burnt it because I was terrified that somebody might read it. This is how.
Bruce has probably still got a copy.
This is how terrible. This is how awful it is. This letter I wrote, I was terrified anybody else would read it, and it was intended for one person. Anyway, I finally got it to receive, and then weeks went by, nothing. Then I got a call from one of the priests in Perth, one of the leaders in Perth. So this is a whole nother locality that doesn't even interchange with us. And he basically called me and said, you're making a mountain out of a molehill. And yeah.
In terms of your request for.
In terms of my concerns, in terms of what I'd written in the letter. I can't go into that, but I was making a mountain out of it. He knew better, and I was making a mountain out of a molehill. Essentially, I could see this guy, but he'd have to come across for 3-day meetings in Clanny. So I don't know whether I influenced the 3-day meetings in Clanny, but it was convenient. It was very convenient that there was suddenly 3-day meetings in Clanny.
I think they named them Cassie's Clanny's 3-day meetings.
Well, yes. Anyway, so he booked his flights. This guy booked his flights, and then they found out that he booked it for 2 weeks. He was coming for 2 weeks, and there was outcry because he was coming for too long, and that we couldn't see each other for that long, and they had to scramble and get an arrangement for him to be whisked off down to the other end of the state so that we couldn't, meet up or have anything to do with each other because, God forbid we actually spoke and got to know each other. That would be scary. Anyway, I remember being just totally confused about this because there was girls in my locality that were dating guys in the same locality, and they saw each other all the time, and they were, talking to each other every week. But I was asking to see this guy from New Zealand, and I was restricted to 3-day meetings, full on, chaperoned visit, that was all had to be prearranged. I had to write to the man of God to ask if I could even see him. So it was a very odd sort of paradox, I remember. You out of everyone I've ever heard have been so forward and I want to talk about consent. I want to see this person again before I marry him. If anyone can be trusted, it's you, right? Because anyone's sensible enough to be able to go on a date or see another guy again without the fear of something untoward happening. It's you. Yeah, well, the thing is, talking about it with my brother the other day, it's almost like they didn't want me to realise that I didn't know him.
Yeah.
Okay. Right. So it's fine if you're in the same locality because you do know each other in a sense. You kind of have grown up together, so you do know each other. But if you're coming from the other side of the world, there's a good chance you have no idea who each other are. And goodness, you don't want them to get to know each other because it may not happen, right? That's almost what it feels like happened. They just didn't want me to realise that I didn't know him. And sadly for them, the changes I saw in him when he went home raised a lot of questions and reservations for me as to whether I could even go through with it. I started asking questions openly about the scriptures, wives be subject to your husbands. I had an argument at work with one of my second cousins about that scripture in particular. And he was saying ridiculous things, like he was telling me my grandpa killed himself because my grandma wasn't submissive to him and all sorts of ridiculous things.
This potential suitor was, you're saying?
No, this is my second cousin. I was having an argument with him at work at lunchtime about it. And he was saying all sorts of things, making claims about my grandpa killing himself and stuff like that. And I said to him, okay, you tell me this, when you get married, to what extent are you going to hold that scripture over your wife? Wives be subject to your husbands. To what extent are you willing to hold that scripture over your wife? And anyway, he just laughed at me and went back to work. And I thought that was the end of it. No way. I got a phone call within 20 minutes and I was called up to the priest's office. Strangely, one-on-one. I don't know what happened to the whole witness of 3. But suddenly in this situation, it was a one-on-one. And he grilled me. He said, I hear you're questioning the scriptures. And I said, no, I'm not questioning the scriptures. I'm asking to what extent those scriptures are held over a wife, And he said, well, and we went round and round in circles, round and round and round in circles. And I wouldn't back down. I said, I'm not questioning the scripture. I need to know to what extent you're going to hold that over me when I'm married. And eventually I feel like looking back on it, he wanted me to say it. He wanted me to say it. And I said, well, rape, are you going to hold it over me? So in the case of rape, is that marital, what you mean? Is that what you're, is that is that what you're trying to tell me? And he couldn't answer the question. And he turned around and he said to me, Are you sure your mind's right?
Oh my God.
And it was, I swear to God, that moment was like a light bulb went off in my head. And I'd never, ever considered leaving till that minute. It was like a light bulb went off in my head, and I just knew that I had to leave. I was not going to survive in that environment, and I was not going to let history repeat itself, and I was not going to become the next basket case, because that scripture was held over me my entire life, and I just knew I had to get out. There was no other way. I just had to get out. The feeling that came over me was just, I just can't explain it. It was just like, I don't even know how that conversation ended, but it was just like, oh, okay, all right, I've got to do this. And and it's weird, because I'd never, ever, ever imagined in my life that I would ever leave. Like it never crossed my mind. I was that goody two shoes little girl doing all the right things. Never, ever had occurred to me that there was an option. And that was it. I just knew then, right, that's it. I have to get out. So then I had to figure out a way to break it off with this guy that I was talking to. And I just was terrified. I just didn't know how to do that. And, he used to ring, and he'd expect me to be there for the phone calls, and I was avoiding the phone calls, and that was making him very upset. And one night I went into, I was talking to him for hours and hours in the dark at night on the phone. And I don't even know what the conversation was about. I literally can't remember, but it was hours. And then right at the end, I just knew it. It just, a feeling came over. It was now or never. And he said something about getting married. And I just said, I can't marry you. I can't marry you. I don't know you. And I just can't marry you. And in that moment, I literally shattered him into 1,000 pieces. And it was the most horrifying experience, like just listening to him break and beg and plead. And, it was just horrible, really, 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 horrible feeling of having to just shatter somebody like that. And I hung up after about 10 minutes of listening to him just sob. And then I must have sat there for another half an hour just shaking in the dark. And then I got up and walked through, and Mum met me I can still see it today. Mum met me in the living room. She'd come to check on me, and she met me in the living room, and she could just tell the look on my, I was completely pale, and she just took me in her arms. She didn't even say a word, and we never discussed it. Never discussed it.
Yeah, she knew.
Yeah. So the fallout from that was awful, because I was really ostracized within the family, within my friends, within the community, because the opinion was that I'd let him on for 2 years. And so you just
always the woman is the problem. Always the women are the problem, particularly if they're smart.
Yeah.
I'm so impressed by this, Cassie. You're so in tune with yourself, which is very unheard of, particularly in women.
Yeah, well, I was a problem then, wasn't I?
Well, not really.
So that was pretty. I went into a pretty deep depression then, because I was just ostracized from everyone. There was expectations. I was, one of my cousins had married one of his friends, and we were all going over there. It was all going to be happy families, and it was all planned. He had the house, and he'd sent me pictures of the house, and it was all, just signed and sealed, really. And then for me to break it off was just uncalled for and just completely unacceptable. I refused to go to the church because of the ostracization there, like the way people would treat me there and just turn their backs on me and stuff. I just thought, I'm not going. So I didn't go to church, and I just went to work, and I came home and I ate and I slept. And that's pretty much what I did for, I don't know how long. It was quite a while anyway. And during that time, because I was the harlot, during that time there was a lot of stuff, but I just wanted to talk about one story. So me and my brother were at the local bottle shop, which was also the pub, because it was such a tiny town. It was the bottle shop and the pub were one, and we were there. We were getting some drinks, and another young couple came in that were in the Brethren to buy some liquor, and they were chatting to us, and then there was some other non-community members there as well, and some young guys, and they sort of joined our group and were having a chat, and they said, "Oh, do you want a drink? Let's have a drink together." And me and Michael kind of looked at this young couple as if to, like they were older than us. So they, it was up to them. It's their decision, right? Because he's the older responsible male. So we kind of looked at him and he goes, "Oh yeah, why not?" So they all got a bottle, and we had a drink. Anyway, it wasn't until years later I found out the story went around that I was caught in the bottle shop with this other non-community member, so this worldly boy. I was caught in the bottle shop with this worldly boy drinking out of the same bottle. So that's how the stories, like Chinese whispers, if you want to sling shit on somebody, you'll make it up. You'll Chinese whisper.
It's that whole projecting and controlling the narrative. That other couple, older people, probably went home, felt guilty, confessed about what happened, twisted the story. You're already believably the underdog. You're the underdog. So let's label her with the rest of it, and it's believable.
Yeah.
Classic example of schoolyard bullying that happens in every locality or church meeting.
I couldn't work out why. Well, I went to Perth one time and actually did go to church because I didn't really have an option. And the girls that I used to talk to at Perth just wouldn't even come near me. Like they were treating me like I was completely leprous. And I don't know. I couldn't work it out, and it wasn't until ages later I found out that was a story that was going around about me at the time. So I was.
All because you shared a drink.
The guy was a bit of a drug dealer, a known drug dealer in the area. So, oh my goodness, what an awful thing to do.
That's the beauty of coming on how many years later and telling the truth, hey?
Telling the truth, right? Yeah.
I just want to clear up some stories, okay?
Yeah.
I mean,
I do not share drinks. I can afford my own bottle, and I'll pay for my own.
Yeah, thank you.
I mean, if they tell stories like that about you when you're in there, how much more do they tell stories about you once you're out?
I know, right? Essentially, I learned later on that my reservations about getting married weren't unwarranted, and I was absolutely right to call it off. But that's all past. Anyway, my brother was playing football at the time. He was still playing football for the local team, and I was in this deep depression and knew I had to break it. And so one time at lunchtime, I was down at the local shop for lunch to grab something for lunch, and I walked to the front of the shop and was leaving, and I saw across the road the netball coach and the netball umpire were standing across the road chatting. And it was like something came over me that just was like, now or never, now or never, now or never. And I remember, like in a trance, I just crossed the road and just approached them and asked them if I could come along to netball training. And it was like I'd never spoken to them before. I knew of them, but I didn't really know them. But it just felt like I have to break this depression, and this is just what I have to do. Like, it's just now or never. And I just crossed the road, asked them if I could come along to training, and they said, yeah, come along on Thursday. So that's how I broke the bubble. I started playing netball for the local team, which was obviously a massive no-no. And yeah, it was really.
What's netball? Sorry, I'm Canadian.
It's like basketball. But
okay, that's what I wondered if it was.
Yeah. Again, team sports, so very, very outlawed, and especially with outsiders. So yeah, I played netball for a while, and that kind of burst the bubble. Like, I mean, it was a harrowing experience in itself, just being exposed to a whole world that you don't have any clue about, and especially me being so sheltered and so focused on being in the brethren that I'd never looked out before. So everything was shocking to me. Everything was, like, it was just an overwhelming, sensory.
Like a sensory overload.
Yeah, exactly.
Because you'd never even been to high school with worldly people. So
no, exactly.
It was a complete culture shock.
Yeah. Anyway, so then mum and dad put up with that for a while. And you know, like they'd obviously berate us both. Me and Michael would travel together to football, and they'd be at us all the time. One particular day, it was a home game, so that was in our local town, and I drove my sister. My sister wanted to come down to watch, and she was 8 years younger than me, and she wanted to come down and watch, and she was either going to ride her bike down like she had before, or she was going to jump in the car with me. And she jumped in the car with me, and I drove her down there. And anyway, after the game, we lost that game, and mum knew that I took losses very harshly. I was very competitive, and when we lost, it really grated on me. Anyway, she knew that I took them really bad, and so she played on that, and she got at me about the loss, and I just went to bed and thought, stuff this, I'm not listening to that crap, I'm just going to go to bed. So I just went to bed. Later on, Michael then came home from football, because the football game was always after the netball, and they both went at him, and I remember they were yelling and screaming at him, and I got out of bed to go and defend him, and they turned on, or Dad especially turned on me and said, "You're a bad influence on your sisters, and you're not welcome in this house anymore." And I just looked at him and said, "All right then." And I just walked back up to my room, and I got my keys and my wallet, and I walked out. And I remember my younger brother saw the look in my face, and he knew that it was serious. Mm-hmm. And he went and jumped in the car, in the passenger seat of the car. And I got in the car, and I said to him, "Andy, just get out of the car. Just get out of the car." And he said, "I'm not getting out." And he was terrified. He was shaking. And I said, "Get out of the car." And he said, "I'm not getting out." I said, "Just get out of the car." And eventually he just looked at me, and then he just got out, and I just drove off. And I drove and drove and drove and sobbed and drove and drove. And I really knew that this was it. Like I just got the sense that, nah, this is it. I've got to do it. Like it's, you know, I'll show them. I'll show them that, you know, you tell me to leave, I'll leave. And I just drove and drove and drove into the night, and I was driving for hours and just crying, and I didn't even have a phone. I didn't even have a mobile phone, and I rocked up. I suddenly came to my senses, and I was miles from home, in hours away in this other little country town, in the pitch black night, no mobile phone or nothing. And I suddenly came to my senses and like, where are you going? Where are you going? Because I had not made a plan or anything. I was just driving. And I thought about it, and I was like, there's my mum's older brother. I could go to him, but I'd never spoken. And he was wicked. Like, he was like, we'd been to all our life being told that, you know, he was like the devil. And I was like, I was terrified to even think about going to him. And then I thought about my other uncle and auntie that left 7 years before. All I knew about them was where they lived. I knew that, you know, there was my uncle and auntie, and they lived in this area of Perth. And so I thought, stuff it, I'm going to have to call them. I'm going to have to call them from a phone box. Didn't even have their number. So I went to the phone box, rattled around, got some coins together out of the car, and went to the phone box, and I rang the directory and asked for my uncle and aunties, you know, in this area. And they gave me the number, and I rang the number. My auntie answered, and she had to try and guide me to her place with no mobile phone and no idea where I was. Tried to guide me into Perth and to where they lived. And then I got almost there and had to call her again from another payphone, and she said, "You're just around the corner," and she was able to guide me to her. And yeah, that was just a phenomenal experience. Like, that's how I got to my uncle and auntie's house. So there I was at my uncle and auntie's house, and I think I asked her to ring mum and tell her I was there, because mum would have had no idea where I was going or where I'd gone. She would have been heartbroken. Like, I can't even imagine. So yeah, I ended up there, and then I was there for a couple of months. And I look back on it now, and I think my poor auntie, she had this 20-year-old, 12-year-old essentially in her house. Mm-hmm. Like, you know, No experience, no worldly experience, completely, like, had no computer skills. I couldn't just go out and get a job. I had absolutely no computer skills, and no experience in an interview, no experience in any of that. I didn't even know what I was doing. I just turned up on the doorstep, and, she had her own family to look after, and she now had this extra completely dependent 20-year-old that was more like a 12-year-old. It's just the most bizarre, situation. But anyway, they were amazing. They didn't, they just let me kind of find my way. And I was there for a couple of months, and then my granny was sick, and I was told by my auntie that there was no one in the world, nobody else in the world that could help her get my granny back home to Delhi. It needed to be me. I had to. And in a certain extent, I was like, well, it's my chance to see granny again, right? So I'll go along.
I know. In the brethren?
Yeah, back in the brethren.
Yeah.
So I'll go along. So we drove up. We went and picked up granny from the hospital she was at, and we drove home. And then we had to stay the night all of a sudden. Then we had to stay the next night. Then we had to stay the next night. And, like, what's going on, are you going to take me back to Perth? Oh, no, granny still needs some care, so we need to stay another night. Anyway, eventually I said, get me back to Perth. Like, seriously, this is getting beyond a joke. I want to go back to Perth. Take me back. And so my older brother came with me, and we went back to Perth with my auntie. And when we pulled in, I went to get my case out to take it and put it in my car. And my brother put his hands on the case, and he said, where are you going? And I said, I'm going. And he said, you're not going anywhere. And he held on to the case. And I said, yes, I am. I'm going. And he said, no, you're not going anywhere. And then my uncle came out, and all my cousins came out, and they were like, just come in for a drink. Just come in for a drink. Just come in for one drink. And I was like, and then another cousin and her husband pulled in the driveway and essentially locked my car in, so I couldn't go anywhere.
It's the same story, cookie cutter. Just one drink. We want to have a chat with one drink.
Just one drink. And then, of course, my uncle pours a drink that's, like 50-50. So, now you can't drive. Just stay the night.
Yeah. Same cookie cutter tactic they use on everybody. One drink and one priestly visit, and then it's all downhill.
Yeah. And then my cousins, my three cousins, bless them, sat up with it all night and brainwashed me, but essentially into staying with them and living with them, and everything was going to be rosy and it was just going to be fine. So I ended up staying with them for a couple of months, and we had the best times because I didn't really care. Like, yeah, I was already the harlot, and I was already the absolute, whatever else, the bottom of the bottom. So I didn't really care, and we just had the best time. And then, bless my poor auntie, she got it in her head that I was going to have an affair with one of them. So I had to be shipped off very quickly. Seriously, your first cousin, it's just sad. It's just so sad. I just feel sad for them that's the way they think. I was shipped off then to another uncle and auntie, and then I witnessed that uncle whip my other cousin with a hose, and I stood up about that. So then I was shipped back home eventually. And then Michael was then being put under a lot of pressure to make a decision, because by that stage he was dating an outside girl and playing football and doing all the wrong things. And so he was told that he had to make a choice between his family or his girlfriend. And he was told one night that, he wasn't welcome in the house anymore. And I just went and sat in the bed with him, and I said, if you go, I'm right behind you. And he was gone. Then he was gone. And then there was a massive focus put on me, and I was told, like, if you leave now, you'll be responsible for him not coming back and all the rest of the stuff that they tell you.
Man.
I was sent away for meetings, encouragement, and sent away to Albany for meetings. And it was just, I was already disassociated, so I don't remember any of it. I remember going down there, and I remember coming back, and I remember thinking on the way back, well, my case is already packed, so I'm not going to unpack it. But that was noticed by my sister, that I didn't unpack my case. And so she wouldn't go to sleep that night. I was in the same room as my younger sister. She's 8 years younger than me. So she was about 13 at the time, I think. Maybe younger, 12 or 13. And she noticed that I didn't unpack my case, and she wouldn't go to sleep so I could go. So eventually I let her go to sleep, went to sleep and let her go to sleep, but I set my alarm under my pillow. And then I got up in the morning and just skittled out the door as quickly as I could and got down the street in my car and realised I didn't have fuel. I had no fuel in my car. And in the tiny country town that we were in, there was no like service station that you could go to and fuel up and go and pay. It was a card system. There was like this fuel sort of bowser, but you had to have a special card to get fuel from the fuel bowser. And I was like, oh, no. So what do I do now? So I snuck back in the house through the laundry door. And damn it, I walked straight into my little sister walking through the living area coming looking for me. And she said, what are you doing? And, of course, I was dressed. And she said, what are you doing? And I was like, it's all right. Go back to bed. And she was like looking at me. And she was, and I said, just go back to bed. And I, look, I'm going back to bed. And I climbed back into bed and pulled the covers up and waited. And I eventually she was asleep, I think. And I just legged it. And I got one of the cards out of Dad's office. And I legged it and went and filled up, and then I was gone. So, yeah, that's how I got away the second time. Anyway.
Did you have like moments of, just like the outside perspective, did you have like moments of, and also insiders that probably feel the same way, like, because I know that the fear of God and God's discipline, and that's the Lord speaking to you. Like, did you have moments of that, like when you didn't have the fuel card? Was it like moments of, like, I don't know how your thought process was.
Strangely that not then I didn't, strangely. I was so determined. And because Michael because at this stage I knew I had Michael on the outside, I didn't. And I think by then we'd already actually sat down and discussed it, and we said, no, it was either then or after. We said, bad things will happen to us. It's normal. It's life. If something bad happens, it's not because we've left the brethren.
Yeah. And I think that's so important to get to that. Yeah.
Yeah. We'd sort of made that pact that, like, if something bad happens, it don't immediately go to because you've left the brethren.
Yeah. And it's so important to get to that mindset, and also like have a network of support of people that are out. Like I've got that amongst my close friends that are members that have left. And you do have those moments of reassurance. You're like, I've ended up in hospital, I've had this or that happen, or you have you're feeling down. And it's like, it's not, just as long as you can be aware that this is life, talk to any other human, and we all suffer, or it's not a fairy tale reality. Like it
is a hard one to reprogram though, right at the beginning.
Oh, definitely.
It takes years to get that out of you. Yeah.
I'm like 7 years out and just thinking it now.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. I still find at times like I revert back and I'm like, oh, and my whole, even my self-esteem and self-worth and all of those things, they've taken a long time, and I'm still working on that. Still working on those, because that's
a journey.
That's ingrained in you. And then, like I see my mum, and she's the most talented and kindest person and the most thoughtful. She would do anything for anybody. But I see her and she's got such low self-worth. And I just think, the potential for you is just incredible. But I just, you've been beaten down for so many years that there's just there's nothing left of you. And that's where I think they have to break you, because your identity essentially has to be super glued to the church. So they can't, if you're a strong person and you've got a strong personality, you're going to see through that and you're going to break that. But if they can break you, then you become so glued, your identity becomes so attached to the church that I've written that somewhere. Oh, yeah, because what happened after that didn't end there, because after that, my mum and dad actually left for a while. So it was around the time, I don't know if you remember, Ben, where they started closing down some of the smaller localities.
Yes.
Do you know what?
Yeah.
I don't even know what happened there. I wasn't in, so I don't know.
You mean particularly in Western Australia they did?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I wasn't around, so I don't know what the directive was, but suddenly Dad had to sell up the farm, and they were moving everyone out from Killarney, which was a tiny little country town, which went against, it contradicted previous ministry about never being able to close down a place that had held the Lord's Supper.
Yeah. And also, but you find that because with the new reign in terms of the Hales family, like a lot of historical things that have been said that, you know, was kind of like clean the slate, new set of rules because there's a new family in. Like it's, well, that doesn't matter. It's what's current. It's what the Paul of our day says that goes.
Right.
But
yeah.
I believe in the same way they do it here now. They shut down those smaller meetings is when they become too hard to control. Like bring it in, send the people off to areas that can be, you know, collected or like controlled, closer to the front, closer to the center, which is where the current leader is, or powerful leadership is. So really strong supporters, be that Melbourne, be that, you know, where they've got stronger personalities that are, you know, cookie cutter copies of, not that they're the same, but like of the leadership of, So that's why they would close them down, because Western Australia and New Zealand historically have been, I don't know so much about the rest of the world, but like just in terms of they historically have been like troubled, you know, always a test, always, you know, a difficult one because they're so rebellious. Yeah. And you'd get that even here, like you sort of went out from Windsor over the mountains to like Orange and then further west. It was always known that you guys kind of had your own accent, or you had like it was like a certain type of twang, and the girls were more strong-willed or powerful than the, you know, like, and the guys kind of liked that, but it was to a point. And one thing you said about being beaten down so your personality is like nothing, like you're a robot within a army. I remember the leader's son-in-law saying to me, my old boss and priest, saying to me at one point that, you know, if they can't, like, I was creative and always will be. So they were like, we can't like beat it out of him, but that he rephrased it to be like, we'll channel it, we'll use it, you know, we'll use you how we can, you know, we'll find a place for you, and our beloved brother would love that, you know, if we could channel you and use it rather than, because, you know, some of us are just not like beatable,
not moldable.
No,
not
I wasn't born to break molds.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so it was around that time anyway that I think, you know, Dad and Mum, I remember a conversation that I had with Dad actually, and I said, when we heard about it, I said to my brother, like, Dad and Mum have to get out first. They have to get out first. There's no way, if they get out last, they won't get out. They won't sell the house, because, you know, like, it was a tiny little country town and all these houses suddenly go on the market. Like, I was concerned about, like, I was like, you know, so I remember I rang Dad and I said, Dad, if you have to go, get out first. Make sure you're one of the first to leave, because if you're the last to leave, you'll never get out. You will never sell the house.
You're so smart, Cassie. So smart.
And anyway, apparently, I don't know, this is just what I've gleaned, but apparently they put an application in to go to Mundaring, and the brethren in Mundaring wouldn't accept them there. So they basically just mollycoddled her. So, I mean, fancy having to put an application in to move somewhere anyway. But anyway, that's what they had to do. And so they put this application, they did all the paperwork and put this application in, and then it just was weeks and weeks and weeks, and it was toing and froing, and, you know, nothing, no response. And then people were leaving months later. People were still leaving, and still Mum and Dad were there. And eventually, I've got someone blowing. Is that too loud? Have you got background noise?
Can't hear it.
Oh, okay, good. So then, Mum and Dad sort of followed up on their application. They were told that they'd filled the application wrong or something, like ridiculous. Like something absolutely, like it was evident, it was very clear that they were just not wanted in Mundaring. And Dad and Mum, I think, got very disgruntled over that, and then they ended up leaving. So they were down in Perth at one stage, and they had been to meetings, and then they were all in the car as a family. And from what I can understand, they said to the kids, right, that's it, we're going to go and see Michael and Cassie. And shock horror, you know, from the older kids, like, what? You know, like that's just the next level of sin, you know, to go and compromise. So they said, stop the car, we're getting out. And, you know, Dad and Mum pulled over, and they rang my other auntie that was in the Brethren and said, come and get us. And I think, you know, like apart from the three youngest, the rest of them got out of the car and went with my auntie. And so Dad and Mum rocked up at our place with the three youngest kids, just out of the blue.
It's so sad. It's so sad that your brothers and sisters, like, and my own, are brainwashed to believe that religion and rules first, rather than a family, the safety of the family, the love of the family. Like, why not take the opportunity? And it's sad. It's conditioned into every generation.
Yeah, so that was really, like, it was great for us. It was like a miracle, and we had the best times. And I reconnected with Mum and was able to explain to Mum why I left. She explained to me her absolute heartbreak, and how she felt like I'd deserted her and all of that. And I said to her, I had to save myself, Mum, you know, and she understood, like she understood. And I was able to give her that understanding. It was like, Mum, history was going to repeat itself. Yeah. I had to get out. Like, I was not going to let history repeat itself. And she knew, like, obviously.
Such good closure.
Yeah.
Great closure.
So I was able to have that all with Mum, and then she, you know, was terribly worried about one of my sisters that had remained in there, and obviously some of the things that I was telling her about what I'd experienced growing up, and she was terribly worried about her and being unprotected and whatever else in there. And so she ended up going back. I think they both went back at some point, and then Dad left again, and came to live with us. And then it was really weird because we were like reverse roles trying to parent him. He was like a teenager letting loose in this, you know, completely outside freedom. And we were trying to parent him, and we were trying to forge a relationship with somebody that we didn't know. We were seeing his personality for the first time ever. You know, there was this person. He had a personality. He was, you know, he actually was a person. So that was just really very awkward and a really difficult position to find ourselves in. And then Mum,
did you find with that, Cassie, like I found when I saw my sister 6 years later, did you find that, like, you've lived, right, and grown and changed, right? They're still that same person. Did you find it really hard to connect and really hard to, like, because what you're connecting on was 6 years old, like 6 years ago?
I'd never had a connection. I'd never had a connection.
Yeah. Yep.
So it was like suddenly this person who was my dad, and I was supposed to be, you know, supporting and caring and loving, but I didn't really know who he was. And then he was also in a world where he was suddenly free and making all these choices that maybe weren't great choices in our eyes, and we were kind of trying to parent him. So it was a very, very weird sort of situation to find ourselves in. And meanwhile, Mum was back in trying to keep the rest of the family together. But essentially, I think because of the contact that she was still having with Dad, because she was desperate to hold on to, you know, to not let him go, that essentially one at a time the kids all moved out, and she was left completely alone in the house because of the contact she was still having with Dad. And then eventually she left again and came and lived with us all. And I think from my understanding, it was always her intention to try to convince Dad to go back. So she kind of thought in some way that if she stayed with him, he wouldn't stray, you know, and she could convince him to go back.
And at this point, are all the kids still in and sort of fostered around?
So all the kids were then lost. Like all the kids were then back in the Brethren system. And I think there's this whole Stockholm syndrome that happens where their identity is so super glued the thought of having them removed or losing them is more horrific to you than anything else. It trumps everything else because your identity is actually them. You know, it's that Stockholm kind of.
And if you lose the kid, they could go to hell. Like if they die in there, at least they're going to heaven. You
but
know,
even in this case, in spouse, you know, in spouse, like, again, I'm not going to go into details, but it got very toxic. Like, they were living together in our house and it got really, really toxic. And we felt like they shouldn't be together. And my brother asked Dad to leave because Mum was extremely vulnerable and extremely distressed. And that was awful situation again. You know, we essentially had to kick Dad out of his own house that he was paying rent at. And Mum was then spiraled out of control. She was suicidal, and we were taking days off work one at a time just to be with her, just to stop her from doing something. And eventually we managed to get her to check herself into the mental health ward at a local hospital. And of course, she wasn't able to say what was really going on, you know. I tried to persuade her to, but she couldn't find it within herself to actually tell the reality. And so all I could do was insist on she had women practitioners only. So I insisted that no male practitioners, only women. Try and give her the best chance to actually open up. And then I was super grateful that she ended up with a therapist that helped her to understand her basic human rights, and give her more tools in assertiveness, and give us, you know, some guidance in being more assertive. And then all of a sudden, you know, relatives that were in the Brethren started rocking up we'd come to the hospital to see Mum, and they'd be there. And then they started taking her out for day trips. And then I could see that they were taking control of the situation again, and there was nothing that we could do. And I sat down with them at one stage and tried to explain my concerns around, you know, her safety and her the toxicity that, you know, I was worried about. And he hushed me so that he didn't want his wife to hear. So he was hushing me, telling me to keep it down because he didn't want.
In case she could relate, you mean?
I think so.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Possibly, I'd say. And then next thing, we lost contact. They whisked her off up to the country again, and we lost contact. And then next thing we know, we heard that Dad was back home as well, and that he was also living, you know, they were living back together and everything was rosy. And of course, we felt absolutely devastated about it all, but there was nothing really we could do at this stage. And fast forward, and that's pretty much status quo. So, but anyway, our life is incredibly free and incredibly fun. And we've both got 2 kids now and very busy, as you can imagine, with 2 little ones. Yeah, so
this is your family.
We didn't go through any of the pictures. Yeah, that's my family now. So yeah.
Such a beautiful photo, Cassie. I love it.
Oh, thanks.
Yeah.
2 little rascals, very cheeky, keep me very busy.
What a gift you're giving them, though, right? Like, that's the thing, that's the gift we're giving our children, is we're giving them the gift of freedom.
This is where it comes full circle.
Yeah.
Well, it kept me strong because I always, whenever I had doubts in those early years, I just said my children would not have to go through what I went through. And that's what kept me strong. You know, I'm very big on breaking generational trauma, and yes. I do a lot of work. And you say, you know, the hangover is, you know, like, it's generational, it's ingrained, and it's indoctrination. And there's a lot of work to be done to break all of that. But I'm very big on that, and I do it constantly. I'm constantly working.
Yeah, that's my life mission too. Same thing, working that generational trauma. I want to go back to this is you and all your siblings.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just wanted to show this. So this is
one of the very few photos of us all together, because my youngest sister was 5, not even 5, 4.5 when I left. So, and she was my baby because I was the second eldest. She was my baby. Like, as I said, I was doing schoolwork and rocking her through the night. I used to take her to mum to feed and take her back and put her to sleep. And I was mum to her. If she fell and hurt herself, she would run to me. It wasn't mum, it was me. And to leave that behind was really, really difficult.
Yeah.
And then there's my little sister wrote me a poem the night that I left the second time. And, I said she came and met me and she knew something was up. She sent me this poem, and I can't hardly read it because it breaks me every time.
You want me to read it?
You can read it, yeah.
It's titled, "You Ran Away." Oh, the times that we had together, hanging out in your Nissan Pulsar. Sometimes we'd laugh all night. Very rare we would get in a fight. You ran away. My heart was broken that very day you ran away. You were coming home from Albany. You'd been there at the weekend to stay. Didn't look very happy to me. Wondered whether it was World War III. You ran away. My heart was broken that very day you ran away. It was that night when you said to me, "Tell me when you're turning out the light." You then waited till I was asleep. Then you crept away without a peep. You ran away. My heart was broken that very day you ran away. Now I lie in my warm bed at night. I think about all those little fights. Then I look at the bed beside me. Makes me cry when I see it's empty. You ran away. My heart was broken that very day you ran away. A hot flannel, cold water in a glass. Thought that I was being way too nice. But now I'd fight forevermore just to have you back with me once more. You ran away. My heart was broken that very day you ran away.
Oh, that's so beautiful.
Yeah. She was very talented. Very talented poet. But it really captures what, from her perspective. Sorry.
It just, does.
Me too.
It captures how these potent rules that they have breaks and shatters a family, and how many people get caught in the aftermath of it. And that is why we do what we do, right? Yeah. We want this to stop, right?
Yeah.
I think
I've got nieces in there, and who knows who they're going to marry, but I just feel like it's like the system and the upbringing and the rules and the regulations, it's actually breeding bullies, and it's breeding environments where this abuse can happen and go undetected. And even if it is detected, it's so buried. Like, I don't believe that most of the members in there, like, I think my mum would think, she was she in her sorrow and suffering, she thinks that, she'll be rewarded in heaven or whatever else. I'm just trying to be a little bit careful what I say, because I don't want to give away too much. But for example, Heidi's case, it's not isolated. They are taught to, if something bad like that does happen, they're very into a bubble. It's put into a bubble, and it's like, oh, it's just an isolated case. It's just an isolated case. It's the only very rare isolated case. It's not. This is the thing. It's not an isolated case, and so each person thinks that they're the isolated case.
Yes, exactly.
If they could actually understand that it's so widespread and it's so I do the numbers, and I think, okay, it possibly would have been me. I know of one of my cousins that was lucky to escape. She's still in there, but she escaped in a way that she didn't have children, so she was allowed to divorce and return home to her mum. So that's my cousin that I know about, and then there's just so many others that I know about, and it's like it's so rampant. Like, if
and you're talking about like things like abuse, right?
Yeah, abuse.
Yeah. So I in the same scenario, 11 friends, close friends that I've helped or are a part of my life, random brethren that we've all come together with a similar trauma, right? Out of the 11, I think 6 of us have had sexual abuse, 1 to the point of rape. Like, you do the ratio, the math, that's over half. One is 1 too many, right?
Yes, 1 is 1 too many. Yeah. And yeah, I mean, there's so much I could say, but I have to obviously be careful.
Yeah. You're respectful too.
I'm trying to be respectful, and I look at, and I do have compassion for those, for the victims, in the sense that they just don't realize how they're not the only one. And if mum could get some kind of understanding of how many are in awful situations, like, it would blow her mind. She has no idea. For instance,
I was going to say,
my
it's so
brother
true,
saying,
they don't know. They don't talk.
Exactly.
Sorry, I was going to say, yeah, go on.
Sorry. Just for example, my brother saying to her, oh, just hang on a minute, take a step back and think about, there's something happening. He was talking about Heidi Camling's story, and he said, something's happening for Cassie that is very triggering for her right now. And he started to explain the situation to her, and she gets that. And he said to her, try to have some compassion when you're talking to Cassie, and she just switched on a dime. And it's they don't understand that these things are happening. Nobody knows. Like, they isolate it so much that nobody knows that it's happening.
What? I think what they took out of everybody in there is they remove their capacity to have compassion, right?
Yes.
And they don't realize that compassion has been squeezed out of them. And I think it happens I've ran into it with ex-members too, that still don't realize that they make you so in your head, they make you live in your head, and the heart is just cut off, right?
Yeah.
The compassion is just squeezed out of every soul in there. That if just everybody could just come down into the heart, it hurts. It hurts so bad to exist here with what's going on. But if we can just get into our hurt together, things are going to change, like inside and outside. Things will change if we can get into our heart. We have to get into our heart.
Yeah, the reason it has to be squashed is because it has to be conditional. Like, it has to be able to be turned off at a dime. When something doesn't, when a family member doesn't do the right thing, you have to be able to switch it off. So it's not unconditional, and it can never be unconditional. It has to be conditional, and that's not real. Like, if you have to have compassion that is conditional, it's not real compassion.
And I mean, we've probably all listened to Heidi's recordings of the recent priestly visits. Yeah. I mean, there's just no compassion in them.
Yeah. I mean, part of that goes back to the whole control factor. You see it in death, you see it in birth, you see it in marriage, you see it in everything about them. Like, okay, so if there's a death, they don't travel, they don't support each other, they bury them quickly. So therefore they're shutting out all the emotion. And the reason for that is then they can control you.
Yeah.
If you can shut off people's emotions, they're easier to control. And you can see it even in a birth. Like, it's not celebrated in there the same way as it is, in other places that you go. A death, if you got really emotional about a death, you were they would call you sentimental. Or, if you wanted to visit relatives or have relatives stay with you, they made a big deal of it and called it Moabitish.
Or natural affection.
It's all about controlling your emotions.
Natural affection, exactly. Yeah.
It's all about controlling your emotions so that if you don't have the same emotions, you're easier to control.
And there's a whole psyche in that too. Like, when you take somebody's rights, basic human rights to show affection or love or be in touch with your emotions, you take away them so incrementally that somebody doesn't realize when you say, okay, we're closing down this church, you've got to up and move 30, 40, 60 years of your living there and your businesses, or your son leaves home, you do not speak to him, he's dead. Like, they wouldn't have that sort of control if it didn't start with the very basic human fundamental things such as like crying or showing affection or love. Well,
I'm a bit of a prophet, because I said to Dad, if you're not the first out, you'll be the last. Well, guess what?
Yeah.
I just love how smart you are, Cassie. I'm like, you were so intelligent.
One thing that strikes me just while you were talking and just saying, well, nobody knows, the extent of it in there. Nobody knows how rampant it is. But there are a few people who know, and those are the big leaders and Bruce Hales himself. These people know. They could give you the statistics. They've got it all in their filing cabinets. And they're the ones that are so responsible, because like the grassroots people who are suffering, they're kept very, very ignorant. But the people at the top, the people who run the place, they know what a hellhole it is. Yeah. And, I really struggle to have any sympathy for them, because they're so responsible. They know what's happening. For
those people, exactly.
They're part of the cover-up, aren't they? Yeah.
And they do know because they are across so many cases. And then there are certain elder leaderships that would come across similar things. Well, they're sort of brought into the fold of the hierarchy higher up and kept within that privileged space, just so that they don't themselves go, hang on, there is something wrong here. Like, if you're kept within that privilege or that pedestal that's a bit closer to the top, then you're not going to say anything against it, because you're reaping the benefits of being a part of that.
Yeah.
Well, it's controlling the propaganda, isn't it? I mean, it's no different to Putin and Russia, and he's not threatened. He's not trying to keep people out of Russia. Nobody wants to go to Russia. He's trying to keep people in Russia. He's trying to keep the narrative. He's trying to hold on to the power in Russia and keep people in Russia. And he controls the narrative. He controls the propaganda. He controls every element of their life. So, it's no different. Nobody's trying to get into Russia. Nobody wants to go to Russia.
And again, you notice he's running a sterile country. He's taking a lot of the emotion out. Somebody disobeys him, he'll shoot him on the street. And then nobody can cry over it. Nobody can get upset over it because Putin did it. You take all the emotion out of people, and they're easily controlled.
It's either, and then you rule by fear, essentially. You rule by fear.
And I know that's an extreme, but when you're exposed to such extreme forms of punishment, for example, on a lesser scale, but still extreme in the breath room, where you are isolated within your own house because you've done something wrong and, have to sit in the naughty room for however long, like that childlike isolation, it's so extreme. There's no room for compassion. There's no room for human error, because, well, it's this or that, like it's black or white. And if you do, you're evil, you're wrong, you're punished. Like, so you're terrified to do anything outside of those bounds. And if you do, you do it within secret. So you're no different anyway.
Yeah, but if you look at what constitute, why people become bullies, I was reading that the other day and it was mind blowing. It's every element of why people become bullies was evident in there. Your lack of control, like essentially you become a bully and then you become an abuser. And I was looking at the reasons that people become bullies, and one of them is helplessness or lack of control. Well, you don't have any control from the minute you're born. Your life is planned and mapped out for you, and you have no say as to what goes, So I'm not saying that everyone becomes bullies, but it's a haven for bullies, because, you've got a lack of control from the very get-go. And then, you're witnessing, maybe you're witnessing a toxic environment at home. That's also another one. And then
that's the new norm, right? That becomes normal. You don't know any different.
Yeah. And then you've got a perceived threat, and you go after someone else to bring someone down. Well, we all know about that. And poor self-esteem. You're taught from such a young age to self-hatred and self-loathing and self-hatred. That's just another reason. And they're all in there. Every element of why people become bullies is in there. And then they wonder why they've got such a huge issue with bullies. I remember a story. One of my uncles had been kicked out and he was fighting for his kids. Well, no, at this stage, he wasn't even fighting for his kids. He was trying to get right according to them. And he was sent out to live on the farm out of town, because it was a tiny country town. So he was sent out to live on the farm, and he had no food on a weekend, and we were a tiny country town with no shops open on a weekend. So he'd come into town to try and get some food. And with the priest at the time, no, I think Dad spoke to him, saw him and spoke to him and said, what are you doing? You know, why are you in town? And he said, I'm out of food. I need some food. And so Dad went to the priest at the time and said, look, you know, he's coming. He's desperate. He's got no food. And he said to him, what's he doing in town? Tell him to get out, back out where he belongs. No compassion, no empathy, nothing.
And the very system they create is that system where, well, any of us, you'd go and get a sandwich for the guy, right? Or give him some money to go give him food because there's no shops. But no, I have to go and ask approval somewhere else because I'm an adult, but too afraid to.
I'm already compromising. So yeah.
It's awful.
But yeah, that was constant. Like and that's what you witnessed, and that's what you were slowly conditioned. Like I was thinking about, you know, women from such a young age are given subtle messages that aren't even said, they aren't even voiced. But you think about from the very get-go, you're silent in church and you're in the back. So that's a subtle messaging. That's a very subtle messaging that you're inferior. And you
don't have any voice in the church meetings. Just for outsiders, there's no microphones back where the women sit. The men sit in the front, which is called the center. The women sit around. They don't partake of church. You don't converse, or, you know, the whole scripture, come let us reason together, doesn't apply if you're a woman. And you sit back and just give out a number for a hymn, like that's your service. That's it. And then you've got people like Cassie and Cheryl and Carmen who are actually smarter than most of the men in the front row. And
all of them are compromised.
I'll take that, Ben. Thank you.
The women are, I tell you, the women I've come across in the Brethren that are still in there, and I know some of them will watch this and have, because they've reached out. You are the smart people. What are you doing in there?
Yeah.
I used to work with one.
It's not as fearful as you think it is. There's so much help out here. That's the thing, is there's so much support out here, right? And if one of us goes down, there's probably 5 to come back up in its place, right? Like there's just like so much support out here. It is like whack-a-mole.
There was one woman I used to work with, and she was so brilliantly creative. She could have run Vogue. And I hope she listens to this and realizes that, because she could be out here running the editor of Vogue. She was so talented. But men hated that. They put her down. There's just so much talent in there as well that is wasted.
Yeah, Ben, it's funny you say that, because one of my missions is to find the little 4-year-old that I was in kindy, that was told by my kindy teacher that you will be Australia's first ever woman Prime Minister.
Oh, wow.
She said that to me, and I lost her for years, and I've got to find her. So look out, world, when I find her.
Julia Gillard beat you to it.
I'll vote for you.
Yeah, I know, Julia Gillard. I was devastated. I was like, damn it, I wasn't quick enough.
But there's other roles, Cassie. There's other roles. We'll have a TV host. Don't worry. We'll have a TV show. I mean,
that's the kid I look back then, and that's the kid I was. I was a real go-getter. I wanted to, and even in primary school, I can still hear my teachers saying to me, so Cassie, how about, whenever there was a group activity, how about we let somebody else be the leader this time?
No. Leaders are born, not made.
Message for Bruce Hales, hey?
So you do lose sight of that. Like by the time I left, I was a shell of that person, and I'm finding her, so look out.
And it's the self-esteem and being able to, even just little things that reminded me when you said that. I really struggled to take compliments. Now I'm like, yeah, hit me up with a compliment, I'm cool with it. But I used to really struggle. I'd get really awkward. I'm like, what do you want? And one of my best mates, she's like, can I just be nice to you? And I'm like, sure, I'm not used to it.
I know, what do you want from me usually? It's
yeah, that's what I say.
Where
are we going with this? What's the objective here?
It's why yawning. See if they yawn back.
I just wanted to finish on for me, my solution going forward is I would like to start I know this podcast has just been incredible, and the stuff that it's covered is just really eye-opening. And I wanted to possibly piggyback off it and talk about the solutions and what people are doing to move forward, and really tap into that. And so I guess I want to make a platform for people who are in that situation and thinking about leaving, and to see a story that they might identify, but then to have the solution, to look at what they did that worked for them, what they did that didn't work for them, where they are now, all their successes. I want all the success stories. So my mission is to start a podcast that piggybacks kind of off you guys and then looks at the solution. I've
been of a similar mindset, Cassie. So we could collaborate on something like this.
Yeah, and you know what? I think we'll talk after we're done recording this podcast. Yeah. I think, right? I think this is really good. We'll you guys can get together an email and that we can ship out for people to send you guys messages and emails on this. So we'll become more clear with it, and then you guys can find an email that people can email you to. Because
everybody's trauma is different. Everyone's trauma is different, and so everyone heals differently. So I just want to make like this huge pathway of solutions and what people have done to move forward.
But the thing is too, Cassie, they're so similar. So it's really good to be able to say, well, hey, this person did this person did,
I agree.
I think that's a brilliant idea.
You know what, Cassie? Oh, go ahead, Richard.
Yeah, no, I was saying it's a brilliant idea. I mean, a few other people have said the same thing, that could you have a podcast that kind of focuses on the success stories? Yeah, I think it's an excellent idea.
I like this idea better, though. I like this idea because it's more focused towards solutions and an active. It literally is the next domino, right? We've got this podcast that is everyone's bringing up their trauma and telling their stories, right? And as you can see, we're at 2 hours of this, and you can't get to that part. No, that's all good. It's all good. And it is. We do need the next domino, which is like, where are we going with this? So I prefer this personally more than people telling success stories. I think it needs to get into what are the solutions, what is the activist part of this, where can we go from this? That just lights every fiber of my being. I love that.
And I on the same note, Cheryl, I think the same. Like I've envisaged at times where I'm like, I would have loved to, with a certain friend or relative that's left, I would have loved to have shared her story. So with you guys, what she went through, talk about, and you get to the end of the story or the episode, as I've noticed with like listening to you guys, and you're kind of like, well, what happened? Like, where did they go? How did they go?
Exactly.
And
the follow-up.
The next part of the episode is like, so 2 months ago you heard on Get a Life podcast, I want to check in with X, Y, Z and tell you about what's happened, and like just get like these, because there's somebody else could be wanting to take those steps, right? In a similar situation, went through everything the same, but is like, well, what happened next? And that's the biggest question.
Want the solution.
Yeah, exactly. I love it. Stay on, Cassie, when we're done recording, and we'll have a quick chat. And yes, thank you so much for coming on. It was such a pleasure. I loved every minute of it.
Thank you.
We apologize to all the viewers and listeners for the long podcast. It was much needed. It's okay. Hopefully you made it through. Take it off in little tiny chunks if you needed to. But yes, thank you so much, Cassie. Much love to everybody.
Love to you all.
Share your story or be a guest on the show. Email info.getalife@proton.me.